Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Earwig and The Witch. This is the latest film from Studio Ghibli. It's their first film to have CG animation, and it is the new film from everyone's favorite Miyazaki, Goro Miyazaki. I think there's a lot that could be controversial about this, like that it's a CG animated Studio Ghibli film, although I will say it was originally made for television in Japan. It was not released theatrically. Here it is mainly by most people being watched on HBO Max, but basing it on like, hey, it doesn't live up to their other theatrically animated films, like, duh, it was never intended for that, I think, the way it was directed. So maybe keep that in mind, as well as Goro Miyazaki is probably like the least liked Studio Ghibli director. Even his own dad doesn't like him that much. So we and I will say the press in general are never very nice to him, to a point that he's even commented that it's like it's literally not very fair, and I would actually agree with him on that. Not that I think he's a good director, I don't. So this film is basically about a little girl who is an orphan. She is left by whom you believe to be a mother. They never really tell you, but on the doorstep of an orphanage. She is left there in presumably England, I'm guessing, based on shepherd's pie, why not? And then she's adopted by a witch and this mandrake type creature. She thinks she's going to, be their kid and stuff, but it turns out she's just there to give them an extra pair of hands. And she slowly kind of learns more about them, has to make spells and tries to learn magic things with a black cat who can talk. It's interesting that when we think of the second generation, whether it's the group that made Mary and the Witch's Flower and made their own studio, or this one, what their deal is with trying to make a really good Little Witch movie is interesting, particularly because I don't think either of those films came very close to Kiki's Delivery Service, but it's like an interesting hang-up. I don't know if that's like a big film. I think that is one of my favorite and one of the best CG Ghibli films, but it's just interesting they both have gone back to that well. And I don't know what that has to say, but I think it says a lot about them trying to recapture a magic that neither of them really did with these. Now I will say Mary and the Witch's Flower they're both trying to be different movies, like their own takes on it, but guys, maybe do something different. And this time it sort of bugged me more, but I do think, although everyone seems to hate this movie, and I don't hate it, I don't think it's good, but I don't think it is that horrible. But I do think it has a major story problem in that at the beginning, to our understanding, the woman who drops off Earwig, or Erica, I believe she's called, when you see she's dropped off, you believe that's to be her mom, and then that plot is completely dropped. And then when the mandrake and the other witch, Baba Yaga, picks her up and makes her her servant, there's kind of the film becomes this other thing. She's stuck in this house, she wants to learn how to escape, or get them to sort of at least give her some freedom or do what she wants, much like she has done in the orphanage, but not entirely. Not everyone's their servant. She kind of phrases it in a poor way, but guess what, kids phrase things in bad ways. I don't like the vitriol reception. I think everyone's being a bit much, but I feel bad for Goro. If I ever met him, I'd give him a hug. The thing is if you had this film start with, hey, she's in this witch house and she has to find her way out, and that is the whole movie. The stakes are basically that she wants to get out of this house. She wants to break out and be as free as she was in the orphanage. That I completely understood. The problem with this film is it sets up this whole idea with her mother and this band that you find that the witch and the mandrake are a part of. And is the mandrake her dad? I'm not even sure because we know so little information. And it's almost like, why are we bringing some of these things into it? It felt like if you had a simple story of this little girl in this weird house where she is forced to be an assistant to the witch, that's a whole movie right there. That's a whole movie. Things are weird. It's just all that stuff. You just set up the orphanage a little bit, and then you get to the house, and that's all you need. But of course, the movie doesn't do that. It sort of wants to act like this whole thing, these witches were in this band or something. We don't really understand, were they that big? What was the deal with them? Why entirely did they split up? Why is she this way? It doesn't answer it, and it holds the whole movie back because you think that that's important, but it's sort of not. What's important is just her in the house with the witch and mandrake and stuff, but that doesn't connect to anything. And although I think I watched this with my daughter, she had a fun enough time, and you sort of do get into the journey of her in the house, I don't think this film was confident enough in that. it kind of like what Goro is doing in here is trying to talk about the orphan and her backstory, make you interested in it, while at the same time talking about like this magical house. But like the film should have just been one or the other. It sort of like mostly does one and kind of does the other, and it was like a really bad choice storytelling wise. And I do think because Studio Ghibli is not only known for its great traditional animation, but also because of its really, great storytelling, a film that is not really good at storytelling and then does CG animation that is not up to the quality that we're getting for other studios, makes for everyone go like, what the fuck is this, Ghibli? And I will say, as a TV movie first attempt, which is, actually what this film is, it's not so bad. But I do kind of think him as a filmmaker. I know Hayao Miyazaki had some minor things to do with this film. This film knew entirely like what it wanted to do and like had just picked a lane basically, because like the whole thing with her mom doesn't really, it's dropped and then not brought back for like almost the entire movie, and you kind of wonder like what was the point of doing that? Like, why have a thing with her? It's never really fully understood. Like, because she's an orphan, we have to know that, but I think he didn't think of why we had to know that in the actual story. There's a lot in actually, Takahata and Hayao Miyazaki films that like aren't explained, but you like never think about it because it's not like brought up and it's not something you would think about. You're too into the story, it's like you don't really know what Kiki was doing before she went off on that adventure. You get like enough and then you move on and you really don't think about it, and it's not important. In this, you do think about it because it's like, motherfucker, you brought it up. Like, what are you doing? What's going on? Like, and I will say, like, the Mandrake, the cool glasses, like that was really neat. I actually thought they used some of the designs to their advantage. Earwig, or Erica, is not designed in the greatest way. I don't even think this is marketed in the greatest way because it makes it out like she is going to be in a band or something. Like, I did not understand like why the poster is a lie, and that doesn't happen in the movie. It's annoying. I don't know if there's a cutscene or something. It's just like, guys, I'm not saying this is like a failure or something, but it's definitely on the lesser tier of Studio Ghibli. Certainly this wasn't made almost by the normal people at the studio. They had to bring in completely new people because Goro wanted to make a CG film, and I am very like uninterested in it. I do think it's a fine little kids film. I think there's like kids films with worse things going on and that are messier and shittier and more boring. Like, it's not as annoying as Scoob or anything, but it was just kind of like, okay. I mean, that was kind of my whole thing with it, is like, I don't think it was the worst thing, but I understand its total storytelling problems. She's just an annoying little girl. I didn't find her to be the worst protagonist in the world or anything like that. Sort of like an alright first TV movie attempt at CG animation, and under the guise of that, I'm sort of like, sure, but I think we do expect more from Studio Ghibli, and that's kind of the weight that Goro as a director has to carry around with him, is that yes, he's not as good as his dad, he's not as good as the studio, his storytelling is not up to that par whatsoever, and we all, when reviewing, whether it's auteur theory or studio theory or whatever the fuck, he had never lived up to that. And this film continues not to do that, and that is a shitty thing to say. We are too shitty to him. I hope one day he makes a film that I actually somewhat give a shit about. But as of right now, he really didn't. This was one like my daughter put on. I'd be like fine, whatever with it. It's not one I would get like, ugh, that again. Maybe if I had to watch it like 7 times or something. But like, she watched it. She didn't request to watch it again. We just sort of like washed it over and like whatever. It feels very much like Mary and the Witch's Flower, which I like more than this. But they're both like films where you watch them, you're like, oh cool, another kind of Ghibli thing. Even if that one I like to a certain degree, you kind of look at it and think of Kiki, or you think of other films from Studio Ghibli's past, and you sort of almost want to just focus on that. You're looking at both these, and this whole thing with this little witch thing they're doing, there's an immediate comparison to a different movie, and that is a stupid idea. Tales from the Earthsea, or From Up on Poppy Hill, or whatever else Goro did, or even Arrietty, are films that I think about when I think of Studio Ghibli. I almost forget about Mary and the Witch's Flower, and I'm already forgetting about Earwig and the Witch, and I didn't see it that long ago before shooting this review. It's just, they're not memorable, because not only are you comparing them, but they're also like subpar, and it's sort of like, going down the grocery store aisle and you're like, oh, I don't want these imitation brands, I just want the real thing. And unless those imitation brands give you something different, which I will say they tried, But guys, come on, please do something else. Like I think what worked about the director of Mary and the Witch's Flower was like his previous two films did do something different. But when he did that one, it just like no one talks about that movie anymore. And I think Earwig and the Witch will be that way as well. I mean, frankly, I think this Warner Brothers knew that because this was of the Warner's to HBO Max films was the one we heard the least about. And yes, I will agree it was disappointing. I just think it's like kind of a mild, like fine enough kids film that should have just been understood what its focus was. And I think as a director and as a screenplay and all that stuff, I do not think this film knew exactly what its focus should be. It was just it was thinking of the questions that needed to be answered in the plot, but it wasn't thinking about why the plot should work itself. And that is such a mystery box bad screenwriting problem. People think, well, what if people have this question? Who gives a fuck? Tell me the fucking story. Like, nobody cares about the questions that they're gonna have. That is like everybody's mess up with so many scripts is like worrying about there's gonna be some article. Like, doesn't matter. Make a tight movie, make the characters work. That's what you should care about. And the mother character did not work. She shouldn't have been in here, and the whole search for her did not work at all. There's so many films that leave things out and they work completely well as script stories. If you're watching this and you're thinking of writing a screenplay, if there's like, but what happened to this person? Get that thought out of your mind right now. If it does not have a point to the actual story that you are telling, it is not worth putting in your thing. I don't care about stakes. I don't care about any of that. Think of the function of the story you are telling. And that is a basic screenwriting thing that like a lot of people don't understand. It's like, it honestly should be something people understand, but they don't. And Goro didn't. And that's why this didn't work. You have to understand the story you are actually telling. And that is the fundamental problem with Earwig and the Witch. Did it work in its own fumbling? Sure, kinda. It probably works a lot better than a lot of screenplays that just like fumble over their own feet and then fall flat on their face. This sure did fall flat on its face, and Goro tried to be bold with it, but he still fell. And maybe he did it in a nice way and didn't break his nose. But in the end, I think we all just kind of look at this and would like the true planning of a story that you kind of feel like he maybe could do, but he almost rejected for the sake of almost like trying to answer all these questions that in the end you get the answer to and you walk away thinking like, why did I even care? So if you have seen Earwig and the Witch and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.